Hello there, fellow Gateballers. Today we're going to be doing the first video of this video series, and we're going to be starting with the court. Now you can find that under Chapter 1, Grounded Equipment, in the official rules book, and it's also under Article 1, labelled Ground. First look at Clause 1, which is labelled Court, and it makes reference to Figure 1. Figure 1 is this figure just here, as you can see on your screen. So we're just going to read the description of the court. The rules state that the court shall be a flat surface that is bounded by the outside line and rectangular in shape and clear of any obstacles. That's a basic definition of what the court itself is, and it basically means that any area that is surrounded by this outside line, or the outermost part of this outside line here, is considered the court. And we're going to go to dot point 2 under that same clause, and it describes the field. And what does it say the field is? It describes the field as, the field refers to the surface inside the court. The field is divided into the inner field and the outer field. Well, there are two fields here. Let's have a look at what that means. Well, we can see that there is an outside line arrow, but we can also see there is an inside line arrow. Now, in most times when we play Gateball in Australia, we don't usually mark the outside line, just to save time, in all honesty. But we have to refer to it here as it is part of the official rules. So the inside line, if we imagine these two lines as a set of tram tracks, or if you're from Sydney, I guess what do they call them there? Light rail tracks. Yep, light rail tracks. We can see that there is a gap between these two lines here. So the area that lies inside these two gaps, or these two lines, is considered the outer field. So the area between the outside line and the inside line is the outer field. And we'll describe the size of that just in a moment. Now, the inner field is all of the area inside the inside line. It's a bit of a tongue twister, I know. So that's the rectangle which is created by the inside line, the outermost part of the inside line, So we'll just keep reading now that we know and have defined the inner field and the outer field, and describing the inner field again. And we've got a description of what the inner field is if we just look at the rule book. And it says the inner field shall be rectangular in shape, 15 metres in length and 20 metres in width. Its outer edge shall be bounded by the inside line. So what does that mean? It's exactly what I just said. So it is a rectangle in shape, and that the inside line is what defines the inner field. It also gives us some sizes, or lengths, shall we say. So this side of the inner field is 15 metres in length, and the longer side is 20 metres in width. And we can see that forms a rectangle on the inner field. It also says its outer edge shall be bounded by the inside line. What does that mean? Well, it means that this inside line itself, you can actually see that it's slightly grey, but on the left-hand side of the grey, if we're looking at it on this side where my cursor is, you can see that it's a darker colour. And that's pointing out the fact that the actual boundary, or the actual line, is the outermost part of the inner field. And it's very important to know that fact for future rules, which we will discuss later on. Just moving on, it describes the line itself, and it says, the width of the inside line shall be set at 5 centimetres, meaning 5 centimetres in principle, meaning that it has to be 5 centimetres wide. It also states that the colour of the line shall be a colour that easily contrasts with the court surface. The inside line shall be set inside the inner field, inside the inner field along the outer edge of the inner field. So that's just going back to what we just mentioned there, with the outermost part being the where the line has to be set in order for it to be relevant. So we take the measurements from the outermost part of the line, not the innermost part of the line, as is done commonly in croquet. So we've got two things there mainly, and that is the size of the line and the colour of the line. So it says that it has to be 5 centimetres in principle. What does that mean? Well, most commonly in Australia, we use JGU, Japanese Gateball Union, and WGU, World Gateball Union, certified line tapes. They are 5 centimeters wide. They are the certified official 5 centimeters wide. But of course, when we engage in tournaments, often we don't have enough line tapes, or we prefer to use painted lines so that we don't affect the balls rolling over them or when tapping onto the court. Now, obviously, paint machines aren't designed to make such a thin line, and often they're quite larger. So the fact that the line is bigger than 5 centimeters obviously doesn't really matter as long as the outermost part, or this dark black part of the grey line which denotes the 5 centimeters, is where we take the measurements from, not the inside part. As long as that is still correct and the measurements are all correct with the 15 by 20 meters to form the rectangle, it should all still be okay. But of course, the 5 centimeters is what is demanded by us from the WGU for official tournaments. Now, the colour is also incredibly important. In Australia, we often play on croquet courts, so using a white tape is practical and efficient at being able to be, easily contrastable, or contrasts easily with the colour of a croquet court, which is green, or in some cases yellow if it's the winter. Now, should we be playing on gravel, or should we be playing on clay, for instance, as they do in Brazil, or perhaps in some parts of Japan they also use clay, I believe. Using a red paint or a red line tape, which does exist, on a red clay is probably not the best idea, in all honesty. So it's just making sure that the players can easily see the line, and especially easily see the line from the other side of the court. We want to make sure that they're able to stroke their ball or spark another ball to a very precise location. You need to be able to see the line for that. Moving along, that was A, under the field. We're going to look at B, under the field, and it says, in an anti-clockwise direction, from one 15-meter side, each side of the inner field shall be referred to as follows: the first line, the second line, the third line, and the fourth line. Now, these are very important when we talk about where gates have to be set out, as well as when we're informing our teammates where they should place balls, should we be on a completely opposite side of the field. So what does that mean? We can see here that the diagram says the first line, and that is this first 15-meter long inner field line. So the inside line is the one that we determine on the eastern side, if north is facing up on this diagram. So right here is the first line, and then we move in an anti-clockwise direction, and we can see that this 20-meter line is the second line. Moving along, this one is the third line, and finally the fourth line is this baseline here. Moving along, we can see part C of that. Each corner of the inner field shall be referred to as follows. The corner where the first and fourth lines intersect is referred to as the first corner, and in an anti-clockwise direction is followed by the second corner, the third corner, and the fourth corner. So in a very similar way, the intersection between the fourth line and the first line, which is right here on the inside line, remember, is labelled the first corner. And in a similar anti-clockwise direction as in the lines, we can see that this is the second corner, this is the third corner, and this is the fourth corner. Moving along down the rulebook, the number 2, which is circled, it says the outer field is a fixed area 1 meter in width, in principle, that lies outside the inner field. Its outer edge shall be bounded by the outside line, and its inner edge shall be bounded by the inside line. The width of the outer field shall be set between 50 centimeters and 1 meter. So there's a lot to take in there, but it's almost all the rules in relation to where the line should be set are identical to the inside line. So first, let's determine where the outside line is. Well, we've already drawn attention to that, and that is this outer line, or the left-hand tram track of the tram track set of 2 lines that are just here. And we can see that it is similarly, on the far left-hand side where my cursor is pointing, is dark black in colour. And that means that the actual boundary, or the actual line, is the outermost part of that line. And the outer field itself is the area between the outermost part of the inside line and the outermost part of the outside line. That's what that rule is referring to. It also says that it should be 1 meter in principle, but can be between 50 centimeters and 1 meter. Now, having played in several tournaments, several of them using 1 meter, in fact, most of them using 1 meter, and one in which I played which used 50 centimeters, as well as watching Gateball on TV for countless hours, we find that 50 centimeters works a lot better, and that's because we really don't want to indicate, a captain should not indicate, shall I say, with his stick where he wants his teammate to place a ball. We really want to be using our hands. Now, in order to do that, the area between the outside line and the area between the outside line and the inside line can't be too far. Otherwise, you'll be really reaching over to be able to get to a point where you can indicate with your hand where you want the ball to go. So 50 centimeters is probably more than preferable for this exact purpose, although it can be up to 1 meter. And it's important because the 1 meter is very important because it will be discussed shortly after. Now, A, under the number 2 in the circle just there, is very important because it also states the outside line should be wide enough to be clearly visible, while the colour of the line should be easily identifiable on the court surface. The outside line shall be set inside the outer field along the outer edge of the outer field. So we won't talk about the placement there because it's exactly the same as the inside line. But what does it say about the colour? Well, it means that it can be different from the inside line, although really you don't want them to be different. It just has to stand out from the court surface. So similarly, if you're using a white inside line, you should probably use a white outside line. Although, for instance, I have attended tournaments in which they use white inside lines and yellow outside lines because they're made of a different string material. But you'll also note here that there is no size given to the width of the line, so it can and often is much smaller than the inside line, as its placement is not as a big of a detriment to the game as what the inside line is, as the inside line is what directly influences play. So moving on from there, we're going to go on to point 3, and point 3 is labelled the start area, and I believe I've got to zoom in. Yep, I've got a zoomed in part of the start area, and we're just going to start by reading the definition. So 3.1 says, the start area is a rectangle created by 4 points, 2 points that are 1 metre and 3 metres from the first corner on the 4th line, and 2 points where 2 vertical lines drawn outward from the first 2 points intersect the outer edge of the outer field. Now that's a lot of Gateball jargon-esque or mathematical terminology to be talking about. Let's simplify that. So we'll just go back to this figure, and you can see that this area here is the first corner, and remembering that this is the 4th line and this is the first line, so the intersection of those 2 lines is the first corner. You can see this little shaded area here, and that is our start area. And it's important to remember that this is called the start area, not the starting area. So we're going to look at this little zoomed in box here. We just need to remember that it is in this part of the court, and we're now going to go into the zoomed in part. So as we can see zoomed in here, this is the first corner. And what does the rule tell us? It says that the 2 points are 1 metre, you can see 1 metre here, and 3 metres away from the first corner. So we are 1 metre away from the first corner, remembering that the first corner is the inside line, not the outside line, and 3 metres across. Therefore, this start area box has a width of 2 metres. So it is 2 metres across in this direction. Similarly, it begins on the outer edge of the inside line. So we can see that it begins on the outer edge here of the inside line, and that is the first line drawn across. Then we can see 2 supplementary lines drawn on the side, and that is referred to just a little bit down, and it says, and 2 points where 2 vertical lines drawn downwards from the first 2 points intersect the outer edge of the outer field. So these 2 lines here, in theory, should be 1 metre long, because in principle, the distance between the outer edge of the inside line and the outer edge of the outside line is 1 meter. But of course, it can be 50 centimeters or 60 centimeters or 70 centimeters. So therefore, it does not give us a definitive measurement for this area, but rather just tells us that we are to draw a straight line at right angles to form the start area. Remembering that the outermost part of the line is where the start area, or the start area is. Then it goes on to state the little number 1 point in the bubble, and it says the two longer sides of the start area are formed by a section of the inside line and the outside line. And if we turn the page, reading along, the outer edge of the two shorter sides of the start area are formed by the following line. The line which forms the shorter side of the start area should be wide enough to be clearly visible, while the colour of the line should be easily identifiable on the court surface. The line shall be set inside the start area along the outer edge of the start area. So that's just going back to the fact of talking that the outermost part of the line, no matter which size either paint or tape or string you use to mark the start area, the outermost part of it is where the start area is. And that goes back, or I should state, that the rules do not make mention of how wide this has to be. Often I find that the string or paint used for the outside line is what is used for the start area, and that's to distinguish it from the inside line. Now, of course, the inside line, the start area, shorter lines, and the outside line could all be the same thing, and that's perfectly fine. But it's just that rule just bringing us to the fact that the outermost part of the start area line is what counts as the start area, not this inside part here. And that's very important. As a ball placed in the very corner here, just creeping into the start area, is considered okay to be played into the game and will not be fouled in that way. It also says that the colour has to be easily distinguishable. That means that in theory you could have a third colour. So you could have a white here, you could have a yellow here, and perhaps an orange here for the tape, the paint, or the string. But in all honesty, usually the outside line and these shorter lines of the start area are the same. So we're going to move on to dot point 4, and it's labeled gate, and that's figures 1 and 2. So that's this figure here, as you can see on your screen. I'm just going to dash past, and you can see this gate image here and this goal pole image here. Both are figure 2. I've just split them up so that we can talk about them individually after. So we're going to talk about the gate, and the rules say that a gate shall consist of a U-shaped 1 centimeter diameter cylinder rod in a color that is easily identifiable on the court. So we have a U-shaped piece of steel, which is 1 centimeter in diameter, or this part here, just 1 centimeter, and drawing attention to the fact that it can be plus or minus 1 millimeter. So it could be, in theory, 9 millimeters or 11 millimeters, but it should be 1. And it is 19 centimeters high, and it is 22 centimeters wide. Now that's mentioned in the next rule, but I'm just saying it here. It also states that it should be an easily identifiable color on the court. What does that mean? Again, back to the lines. Often these come pre-painted, often they come as just plain steel. Now, if they are just steel colored, that is perfectly fine because they're easily seen on a green court. But were we playing on, should we be having a game on gravel, it'd be really hard to see a gate from far away. So perhaps we should be using an orange-coloured gate, or I've even seen pink-coloured gates before. So that's really important to make mention of. Now going back to the two measurements that I was describing here, the 22 centimetres and the 19, that's mentioned in the next rule, and it says, the 2 legs of the gate shall be secured vertically on the ground so that the inner space between the 2 legs is 22 centimetres wide and 19 centimetres high. So from the court surface to the inside part of the uppermost part of the gate is 19 centimeters, and in between the innermost part of the two legs is 22 centimeters. So that's relatively straightforward. Part 3 under gate says that the gates include the first gate, the second gate, and the third gate. And the rules go on to describe exactly where each gate is. So we're going to do that. We're going to go back to figure 1 here, and we can see that the first gate is labelled here, and it's very close to corner 1. We can see that the second gate is about just over halfway down the second line, and we can see down by the fourth line, exactly halfway, 10 metres down the fourth line, there is the third gate. Now, we're just going to read through the placement of the first gate, and the rules say, the point exactly between both legs of the first gate is positioned at a point 2 metres from the inside line and at a right angle to the third line from a point 4 metres from the first corner in the direction of the second corner. The gate shall be set so that the imaginary gate line, which passes through this centre point and runs parallel to the fourth line, is in contact with the outermost edge of both legs of the gate facing the second line. Now that's a lot of words to describe something incredibly simple. What's that rule telling us? Well, it's telling us exactly where we have to place this first gate. So basically, it's saying that the measurements we take are from the absolute center of the gate, and I believe I've actually got an image, yep, just here, which describes the front side and the back side of a gate. But it's very important to mention that the measurements are taken from the center of the gate, not from this leg, not from that leg, but from the center of the gate. And it also said something about an imaginary line. What does this mean? It says the gate shall be set so that the imaginary gate line, well, what's a gate line? If we go back here, we can see that there is a gate line drawn from the front, the back part or the back side here of the gate, and that is where the measurements have to be taken from. So if this arrow tells us that we run balls through the gate or we pass the gate in this direction, the gate line is on the back side of that gate, and that's where we take the measurements from. So if we go back to figure 1 here, and we look at the first gate here, we can see that imaginary line has been drawn for us all the way across to show us exactly where it needs to go. So it's stated that it needs to be 4 meters away from the fourth line, and it needs to be 2 meters away from the first line. And at right angles, we create the point of the first gate. And that is essentially how we need to know how to set out gates. Now, I'm not going to go through it for the second gate and the third gate because they're relatively straightforward, and I'll let you read through those in your own time with the rule book. They're relatively straightforward and you shouldn't have any problems there, but it is important to remember where that imaginary gate line is, because that's going to come into play later in relation to when a ball actually passes a gate. Right. Now we're going to make some more remarks about gates, but not about their position. And if we go to gate 4.4, it says the top of each gate shall be marked by a gate number. Now, I haven't got any pictures of gate numbers, but I'm sure we're familiar with what they look like. They are, according to the rules, they should be no greater than 10 centimeters in both height and width. Now, there are obviously 3 gate numbers, and they sit just on top of the gate here in usually a square, and they are, most suppliers make them of a yellow or orangey color with a bright black number printed on top. 1 for gate 1, 2 for gate 2, and 3 for gate 3. And we need to make note that the rules say the top of each gate shall be marked by a gate number. What does the word shall mean when we're talking about the rules? Shall means that it is a must. It is not a if, it is a must. Now, when I say must, I mean that were we organising a tournament, we must make sure that anything that is a shall in the rulebook is done. So when we're talking about the gate numbers, there must be a gate number placed on top of each of the 3 gates. And obviously following that 10 centimetre by 10 centimetre restriction in size. So we're going to go to dot point 5, and it says the area surrounding each gate shall be referred to as its front side and the back side separated by the gate line. So obviously we can see that this whole area here extending outwards is the front side on that side of the court, and this side of the gate, if the balls are passing through the gate in that direction, is the back side of the gate. So that's relatively easy to know, but again, incredibly important to know when we're discussing when a ball has actually made a gate. Reading along, it describes what the front side is. It says the front side of the gate refers to the side of the gate facing the fourth line, while the back side of the first gate refers to the side of the gate facing the second line. So that's specific to gate 1. So obviously, if we go back here, this is the front side of gate 1, and this is the back side of gate 1. So that's what that's describing there. And then the next two dot points in little circles in the rulebook are telling us about the second and the third gate, and I'll let you go through those on your own. Right, moving right along, we're going to be discussing the goal pole. This is an official goal pole. Be careful not to refer to this as a peg. A peg is a word used, or stake is a word used in croquet, and as this video series is designed for Australians, obviously we're going to be more accustomed with the word peg. But we need to be referring to items of the court, especially in relation to exams and refereeing, by their official names in the rulebook. And that is, for this item, the goal pole. So what is a goal pole? The goal pole shall consist of a 2 centimeter plus or minus 1 millimeter diameter cylinder rod in a color that is easily identifiable on the court surface. So I'm not going to discuss the color again, as usually the goal pole and the gates are of the same color, and therefore we're not going to discuss that. But it is a cylinder which is 2 centimeters in diameter. We can see that there, 2 centimeters in diameter. Moving along, dot point 2, it says the goal pole shall be secured vertically at a height of 20 centimeters above the ground. So after you've hammered the goal pole into the ground, it needs to be 20 centimeters from the court surface up to the very top of the goal pole. And it states where the goal pole should be set. Much easier than where gates are. It says that the goal pole shall be set in the center of the court. So if we go back to figure 1 here, we can see that the goal pole is set in the absolute center of the court. Moving along, we're going to be discussing figure 1 again, and this is the last part of this article, and that is clause 2, which is labeled the free zone. Now, I find this one a little bit hard to describe in some cases, especially in Australia, because we don't talk about it very frequently, but it is extremely important to the rules. And reading the rules, it says, under clause 2, dot point 1, a free zone shall be set outside the court. Now, where's the free zone? The free zone here is measured right here. Now, it's important to note that there is actually no measurement for the free zone. As you can see, there are no measurements set, but it is an area directly outside the outer field, and you can see it's labeled, well, shaded in grey here. And it says, during a game, only the players, managers, referees, and persons invited into the zone shall be allowed to enter. That's really important to make sure, and the reason that they give you the concept of the free zone is to say that the game should not be impeded by people coming in and out of the direct area in which players are sitting or standing. Talking about sitting, it says on part 2, a waiting area shall be set inside the free zone. The waiting area shall have seats, benches, chairs, etc., or the like, for the manager and players to sit on. So, this is why I was drawing attention to Australia in particular. In Australia, we do not talk about the seating area, or the waiting area, as I should say. When you lose the toss at the beginning of the game, obviously, in Australia, we don't really think of very much, but there is actually something you have a choice about, and that is where your team, which seating area your team is permitted to use. So we'll discuss that a little bit later in some relevant rules in relation to the seating area. But we draw back to the word shall in this rule. If we read back, it says the waiting area shall have seats, benches, and chairs. What does that mean exactly? It means that in theory, in a tournament, there should and must be chairs and seats available for players to sit on, should they wish, during the game. So obviously something that does not happen in Australia and definitely not in Victoria where I'm from during tournaments, mostly because it's just a little bit impractical to be carrying out chairs and things like that. But in theory, they really should be there. The very last thing we're going to be talking about for this video is dot point 3, and it is about a scoreboard. And similarly, we see the word shall again, and it says a scoreboard shall be set within the free zone. I'm sure we've all seen gateball scoreboards, and they're used pretty universally throughout Australia and the rest of the world. They are the absolute rule when it comes to what the score actually is, other than, of course, the recorder's score sheet. But it says that the scoreboard shall be set within the free zone, and then it goes on to describe a little, and it says the scoreboard shall be set in the view of the players of both teams and spectators. Also, the scoreboard shall be set so that it does not impede on the game. So obviously, we don't want the scoreboard sitting, often in Japan they just shove it in the second corner, right up against the outer field where it's very, very hard for it, where it's easy for it to impede on the game. So we want to have it suitably far away that everyone can see it and that there's a clear view to it, and that it is not impeding play. So, thank you very much, fellow Gateball players, and thank you for tuning in for the first episode of the series, or first presentation of the series, and I hope you've enjoyed. You've got a little bit of light reading to do for yourselves, but I hope that this has been beneficial. Bye-bye, and see you soon.